Put that down." Maximus heard the tension before he saw it. The front door clicked shut behind him, its usual groan muffled tonight, as though even the house had learned to tread carefully. For a moment, he just stood in the hallway, bag slung low on one shoulder, listening. No music, no television. Not even the hum of the extractor fan from the kitchen. Just the sound of cutlery meeting porcelain, deliberate, sharp, like someone trying to stay busy enough not to scream. He kicked off his trainers and padded into the hallway, peering around the corner. His mother was in the kitchen, wiping down an already spotless surface, the cloth moving in small, agitated circles. Each time she placed a plate down, it was just a fraction too loud, the ceramic clink like punctuation to thoughts she wasn't speaking aloud. In the dining room, his father sat rigid at the head of the table, still in his work suit, tie slightly loosened, collar askew. The light from the overhead pendant cast long shadows across his face as he stared at a single sheet of paper on the table. His jaw locked tight, like he was daring it to move first. "Everything all right?" Maximus asked. He tried for breezy, that faint laugh people use to test the mood before they fully step in. But even to his own ears, it sounded thin. His dad didn't look up, just ran a hand over his mouth, slow, like he was measuring his words or suppressing them altogether. His mom answered instead. "Long day," she said curtly, without looking up from the spotless surface. "Dinner in 10. Maximus nodded, though he doubted she saw. He turned to head upstairs, his footsteps deliberately slow, a quiet protest. On the landing, he paused and looked back down. His father hadn't moved an inch. Upstairs, his bedroom felt too small. He dropped his bag, flicked on the lamp, and stared at his desk like it might offer clarity. It didn't. He paced instead. He wasn't sure what exactly he'd just walked into, only that it had been building, slowly, like water behind glass. This wasn't the first strange silence he'd walked into, not lately. The house had grown quieter in ways he couldn't quite explain. Dinners that used to be filled with overlapping stories and wine-fueled sarcasm had become perfunctory, like administrative meetings. His mom had developed a new habit of scrolling through her phone while chewing. His dad had become obsessed with emails, answering them between bites. Something unspoken had crept in and taken a seat between them. A cold guest no one acknowledged. He flopped onto his bed and stared at the ceiling. Beneath all the everyday noise of school, mates, training, there was a thrum now. A low, uneasy frequency he couldn't quite shake. He didn't know if it was in the walls or in him. Back downstairs, he could hear his mother serving dinner, plates being shuffled, cutlery laid out. But no conversation, no laughter, just the mechanics of a family pretending to function. He wasn't hungry, but not going down would raise more questions than he had energy to answer. When he entered the dining room, his dad's plate was already served. He hadn't touched it. The paper was gone, but something lingered. A stiffness in his shoulders, the kind that says, "I'm holding something back because if I don't, I'll break something." "Good day at school?" his mom asked, without looking up. "Yeah," Maximus lied, taking a seat. "Fine." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was strategic, the kind that leaves enough room for someone to speak, but not enough to make it feel safe. He glanced at his dad, who chewed his food without tasting it. Maximus noticed his knuckles were pale against the fork, as though holding on to something invisible. What was on that paper? And why did it feel like the whole house was bracing for impact? There was a letter, unopened, slipped just so, half hidden beneath the toaster like it was trying to disappear into the marble. Maximus hadn't meant to notice it. He'd only come in for juice, still in his school uniform, shoes wet from the rain, bag slumped in the hallway. But there it was, rough brown against the darker worktop, its edges too clean, too deliberate. It didn't belong with the usual clutter. No takeaway menus or supermarket coupons. Just a single envelope. Plain. Stark. Government issued. He recognized the crest in the top corner. Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. His stomach did a small, involuntary somersault. He reached for it, fingers brushing the corner, not opening it, not even lifting it properly. Just touching it, as if that might make it make sense. That was when he heard it. Put that down. The voice was sudden, too loud for the quiet room, and it hit like a slammed door. Maximus flinched, hand withdrawing as if burned. His father stood in the doorway, rein on the shoulders of his coat, his expression hard to read. Not angry, not quite, but taut. Like someone pulling too tightly on a drawstring bag, knowing the fabric could split. Didn't ask for an explanation, his father cut in. The words came flat and fast, devoid of their usual warmth. Even in the worst arguments, his dad never spoke to him like that. Not even when he crashed the car. Not even when he skipped mock exams to watch a gig in Brighton. This was something else. Maximus stepped back, eyes on the floor. Right. Sorry. His father crossed the room in a few brisk steps, retrieved the envelope, and slipped it inside his coat pocket with a kind of finality, like someone sheathing a weapon. Don't go through other people's things. And then he left the room. Just like that. Maximus stood in the lingering silence, staring at the space where the letter had been. The air still felt charged, like static after a lightning strike. He opened the fridge, took the juice, poured it without tasting, and drank in long, steady gulps. His hands shook faintly, betraying what he wouldn't let his face reveal. It wasn't just the shouting, it was the tremor in his dad's voice beneath the surface, something tight and cracked, like he was gripping too hard to keep from falling apart. Something was wrong, properly wrong, and it wasn't the kind of wrong that could be fixed with a chat over Sunday roast. Later that evening, the envelope haunted him. He sat in his room, trying to revise for an economics quiz he didn't care about. The textbook open but unread. His mind kept circling back to the logo, the understated authority of it. Government letters didn't come for no reason. Not in that kind of envelope. Maximus wasn't naive. He knew the basics: taxes, forms, fines. His dad worked in finance, senior management at a mid-sized consultancy in central London. Suits and trains and coffee and cardboard cups. He was the kind of man who liked structure, order. The kind of man who ironed his jeans. So why was he hiding government mail? And why had his hand trembled as he walked away? It wasn't just the letter. It was everything lately. The muttered arguments between his parents when they thought he'd gone to bed. The way his mum's smiles seemed surgically placed, like they'd been installed but never quite connected. The subtle shift in the rhythm of their life. His dad coming home later, his mum staying out longer. Dinners eaten silently, rooms passed like strangers in a corridor. And now this letter, this small, silent proof that something was fraying, not just in the marriage, but in whatever scaffolding held their whole family up. He heard the front door open and close again, his father leaving. Late. Too late to be going back to the office. But he didn't ask, and he wouldn't. That was the new rule, wasn't it? Don't go through other people's things. even if those things were your life, even if the silence was starting to echo. Maximus turned the page of his textbook, eyes scanning words he wouldn't remember. The rain tapped gently against his window, like someone knocking to be let in. He didn't answer. Not yet. Later that week, Maximus stayed behind after football training, letting the others filter out one by one. The changing room emptied like a tide going out. Loud voices fading, studs clicking on tiles, the thick tang of sweat and grass slowly dissipating. He sat on the bench, elbows on knees, listening to the silence settle. His kit clung damp to his skin. Steam rose faintly from his shoulders as the warmth of training gave way to the cold of what followed. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for, only that the idea of going home made something in his chest clench, something unspoken, like crossing a bridge you knew was crumbling, but had to walk anyway. When he finally made the slow walk back home and pushed open the front door, the house was humming, not with music or conversation, but with tension. His mom was in the hallway, pacing with her phone pressed tight to her ear, her voice low but clipped. "I told you, Paul, I need the payment sorted by Friday. I've already rescheduled twice. I don't care what the bank said." She turned, saw him, and the change was immediate, like a mask sliding into place. "Yes, I'll call you back," she said, and hung up in a breath. She smiled, all lips and no eyes. "Hi, love. Good training." Maximus nodded, but his eyes lingered on the phone still clutched in her hand. Her fingers were tight around it, white-knuckled. "Yeah, fine. Dinner's in the oven. Lasagna." He watched her walk past him towards the kitchen, her heels clicking too precisely on the wooden floor. It was her put-together walk, the one she used when she didn't want anyone to see the cracks. But they were there, just beneath the surface. Her hair wasn't done. Her earrings didn't match. There were creases in her blouse, and Maximus couldn't remember the last time he'd seen her wear something without ironing it first. Little things, out-of-place things. He followed the smell of garlic and tomato to the kitchen, but his appetite had already curled up and disappeared somewhere behind his ribs. The living room door was ajar. His dad wasn't home, again. Later, as he picked at the food, fork dragging lines through the sauce more than eating it, he replayed the phone call in his mind. The words, "rescheduled twice," clung on like hooks. And the bank. His mom didn't work, not anymore. She used to. Something corporate, something with files and lunch breaks and boxed heels. But she gave it up after Maximus started secondary school. Said she wanted to be more present, then said it was for her health, then didn't say much at all. Now she ran the house like it was a hotel. Clean, polished, hollow. Whatever payment she was pushing for, it had nothing to do with him. He knew that instinctively. This was adult business, marriage business, financial knots no one had dared to name aloud. That night, he lay in bed, listening to the pipes hiss and the floorboards creak as the house settled into itself. Every sound felt louder these days, as if the quiet was listening back. He thought about how strange his father had been, the sharpness over the envelope, the hand tremble. He thought about the late nights, the evasions, the way his mom's smile always arrived half a second too late. There were things slipping through the cracks. Conversations paused mid-sentence when he entered a room. Paperwork left half-covered on the dining table, whisked away when he got too close. Bills in drawers, whispers on the phone. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't screaming or slammed doors. But it was there. The slow undoing. The steady, silent erosion of whatever had once held this family together. Maximus wasn't stupid. He'd seen it happen to other people. Friends at school whose parents took a break and never came back. People who moved house with no warning. whose mums cried in cars outside the school gates. But he'd never imagined it here. Not in this house with the neatly trimmed hedges and overpriced candles. Not with his dad in suits and his mum in tennis whites. Now, it all felt paper thin. He got up and crossed the room, cracked his window just an inch. The cold came in quick, biting, but it was clean, at least. Honest. Downstairs, he heard the front door open. Footsteps. His father's voice. Low. Tired? No words, just the sound of him being home. Maximus listened, eyes on the ceiling. And for a second, just a second, he wished he'd stayed at school a bit longer. It was a Friday evening that cracked the calm wide open. The house was dim, lit only by the amber pools cast from hallway lamps and the flicker of the television in the lounge. His mother had gone out, drinks with someone she hadn't named, wearing heels she hadn't worn in months, and lipstick that didn't quite suit her. She hadn't asked where Maximus would be, just said, "Don't wait up." His dad was home, though, and had disappeared into the study after dinner without a word. That in itself wasn't unusual. The study had become a sort of refuge lately, not for reading or writing, as it once was, but for containment. The door always sat slightly ajar, as if daring someone to listen, as if his father wanted to be overheard, but not confronted. Maximus was on his way to the bathroom when he heard it. A voice, low and tense, his father's, sharp-edged and hoarse at the same time. The kind of voice that had been worn down over too many nights of worry, stripped of all its polish. "I covered the missing funds with personal credit," he said. Maximus froze just beyond the doorway. The words hung in the air like frost, sharp and sudden. He edged closer, careful not to let the floorboards groan. It was meant to be temporary. His father's voice dropped again, heavy with something Maximus couldn't quite name. Guilt? Maybe. Or desperation cloaked in authority. There was a pause, and then the quiet static of someone replying on the other end. Maximus couldn't make out the response, only that it wasn't good. The silence was telling. Defensive. "I know what I did," his father said. "But the board doesn't need to know. Not all of it." Another pause. This one longer, more dangerous. "I'll fix it," he said finally. And that was the last thing Maximus heard before he stepped away. Fast, light on his feet, heart pounding in his ears. He didn't make it to the bathroom. He didn't need to anymore. Back in his room, Maximus sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall, as if it might offer some kind of clarity. The words circled in his mind like vultures. Missing funds. Covered it. Temporary. The board doesn't need to know. He wasn't naive. Not anymore. He might not understand the specifics, but he understood the tone. The kind of careful, loaded language that people used when they were trying to keep their world from falling apart. The kind of tone you used when the lie was already in motion. He thought back to the envelope. HMRC. The way his dad's hand had trembled when he took it from him. The sudden, uncharacteristic anger. The silence over dinner. His mum pacing with the phone, pushing payments, juggling deadlines she never used to mention. It wasn't just overdue bills. It wasn't even just debt. It was bigger. Riskier. Something with legal weight. Fraud, he thought, though he didn't like the shape of the word in his head. It sounded too cold, too public. But wasn't that what it was? Covering funds that didn't belong to him, hoping no one would notice, then praying no one would dig too far when they did. He lay back, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows slide across the plaster. His jaw clenched, thoughts rushing too fast to settle. What would happen if it came out? If someone at his dad's company called the police? If the board didn't believe the promises, didn't wait for it to be fixed? He thought about the house, the car, the school fees, His mom's tennis club, her blow dries, the credit cards she never seemed to check, his dad's suits, always dry cleaned, his own trainers, a birthday gift that had cost more than some people's rent. It was all built on something fragile, something borrowed. Maximus had never thought about money before. Not really. It was just something that existed, behind the scenes, invisible and constant. He hadn't realized how visible it became when it started to run out. And now, with that one overheard conversation, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The walls of the house felt thinner. The air felt colder. Everything ordinary had become suspicious. He reached for his phone, thumbed it open, and stared at the screen. For a moment, he thought about messaging someone, one of the boys maybe. But what would he even say? "Hey lads, my dad might have committed fraud. Fancy a Nando's?" No, this wasn't that kind of thing. This was the kind of thing that lived in silence, that festered in the dark. Downstairs, he heard the study door close with a soft but deliberate click. Not a slam, a seal. His father, locking the secret back behind it, or trying to. Maximus rolled over, pulled the duvet up over his head like he used to when he was a kid. But he wasn't a kid anymore. And secrets like that didn't stay sealed for long. He knew that now. And worse, he knew that whatever came next, it wasn't just going to blow over. It was going to blow up. That weekend, Maximus started seeing things he hadn't noticed before. Or maybe things that were only just starting to unravel. His mom's earrings, once pearl and gold, now looked just a little too shiny. The kind of shine that came from lacquered plastic, not precious metal. She still wore them with the same deliberate grace, brushing her hair back to show them off. But the illusion didn't quite hold. The way a counterfeit bag never slouched quite right on a shoulder. Speaking of bags, the mulberry was gone. Not lost or broken, just quietly replaced by something softer, plainer. The logo-less kind you picked up in department store sales, not Bond Street boutiques. It wasn't announced, of course. Nothing ever was. In this house, decline came in whispers. He noticed the car, too. The family Audi, once a proud, gleaming machine that had ferried them to every parent's evening, swim meet and football match, had been swapped. Same color, nearly the same model, but the license plate was different. Newer, cheaper trim. Maximus ran a hand along the dashboard on Saturday morning, checking. Faux leather. Something about it felt thinner, less certain. No one said a word. The silences had texture now, not empty, but heavy. Full of unspoken things that pressed in from the corners of every room. At dinner, it was roast chicken. The skin slightly too crispy, as if his mom had left it in just a few minutes too long. Distracted, perhaps. She still laid the table like she always had. Wine glasses turned just so. Folded napkins, even though no one cared anymore. Maximus passed the carrots without being asked. He watched his parents over the rim of his glass. Water now, not wine. The bottle of red that usually sat open on the counter was absent. Maybe it had become too expensive to keep that little ritual going. Or maybe she didn't trust herself with it lately. "So," his mom said, voice tight with a kind of artificial brightness. "How's school?" Maximus shrugged. "Fine. Just fine." He glanced up. Her lipstick had smudged slightly at the corner of her mouth. She didn't seem to have noticed. "Yeah, nothing much to say." His dad said nothing, just prodded his chicken with a fork, like it might yield answers. He hadn't shaved properly. A shadow of stubble was creeping along his jawline. Not rugged, just tired. There was a pause. Then his mum laid down her cutlery with the kind of precision that made Maximus look up again. "I might go back to teaching," she said, almost casually. "Private tutoring. Just a few local families. Some of the girls from tennis have asked." His dad looked up slowly. eyes rimmed red, like he hadn't been sleeping right. "Since when?" he asked, voice flat. "Since it became clear I can't rely on you," she said. And her tone was calm, not cruel, but sharpened, not loud, just clear. The silence that followed was immediate, not dramatic, not shouted, just a stop, like a needle lifting off a record. Maximus kept chewing. He didn't look at either of them, just focused on the taste of burnt garlic on the potatoes, the way the chicken skin cracked between his teeth. He let the sounds blur into the clink of cutlery and the faint tick of the kitchen clock. "Nothing I ever do is good enough for you, is it?" his dad said finally. His mom didn't respond. She didn't have to. Maximus felt the weight shift across the table. This wasn't a row. It wasn't even anger. It was something worse. Distance. The kind of distance that wasn't fixable with an apology or a good night's sleep. It was the quiet acceptance that something had broken a while ago, and they were only now daring to say it aloud. He wanted to ask what tutoring had to do with any of it. He wanted to say that if she needed money, they should just talk about it. But he also knew that wasn't what this was about. It wasn't about tutoring. It wasn't even about money. Not entirely. It was about trust. And how it evaporated, molecule by molecule, when you weren't watching. After dinner, his dad went into the study again. Door closed this time. His mom cleared the plates, wordless. Maximus helped, dried the dishes without being asked. Later, in his room, he scrolled through his phone but couldn't read anything properly. Messages from mates, a link to a meme, a TikTok someone sent him twice. It all felt distant, too loud, too fake. He put the phone face down and stared at the ceiling. Something was giving way. He didn't know exactly what it was yet, or how far it would fall. But he could feel it, like the breath before a confession, the air before a storm. And for the first time, he wondered how long they'd all been pretending not to notice. On Monday, the sky felt too bright. One of those cold, hard days where the sun had nothing warm to offer. Maximus left school early. A canceled PE lesson. No real reason to linger. He told himself he just fancied walking home, getting a head start on homework. But truthfully, he hadn't wanted to be around people. Not today. When he opened the front door, the house met him with a strange kind of quiet. Not the usual afternoon hush. This one was brittle, like the sound had frozen mid-breath. He dumped his bag by the stairs and noticed the study door was ajar again. That door had become a sort of barometer in the house. Closed meant stay away. Half open meant maybe, if you're lucky. Wide open meant something had either gone very right or very wrong. Today, it was open all the way. His father sat at the desk, elbows resting on the polished oak, hands buried in his hair. He was still wearing his shirt and tie, but the collar was undone, and the tie hung like a noose loosened in a hurry. His laptop screen glowed pale blue in the dim light. Maximus stood still for a moment. Then, without quite meaning to, he stepped inside. The room smelled like old paper and stale coffee. A mug sat next to the laptop, untouched, its contents gone cold. His father hadn't noticed him yet. Then Maximus saw the screen. One email, open, the subject line in bold. Notice of disciplinary hearing. His stomach dropped. As if sensing it, Paul finally looked up. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said. His voice was quiet, flat, like something worn smooth by friction. Maximus stood by the door, fingers gripping the frame. "You're in trouble?" Paul gave a crooked smile, but there was no humor in it. Just the kind of smile that said the joke was long over and the punchline had landed badly. What gave it away? Maximus swallowed. He didn't know what to say. The question he wanted to ask felt too big, too sharp, but it tumbled out anyway. "What did you do?" For a moment, Paul didn't answer. He just stared at his son. And Maximus saw it then, the things his dad had tried to hide. The weight in his shoulders, the new shadows under his eyes, the tremor in his left hand. All the things that had crept in unnoticed, or maybe deliberately ignored. "I did something I thought would save us. I was trying to keep up," Paul said finally. The words landed like a bruise. Maximus waited. For an explanation, for detail. Something that might make sense of the half-heard phone calls, the hidden letters, the tension in every room. But none came. Paul leaned back slightly, rubbed his hands over his face. It was stupid. It started small. We had a cash flow issue at work, a project that fell through, some delayed invoices. I covered the gap with a short-term transfer, meant to reimburse it the following month. He paused. But things kept piling, and I thought I could fix it, that I could dig us out before anyone noticed. But I can't handle the weight of the credit, not with all of the outgoings we have. It's just too much. Maximus stared at him. "And now they've noticed." His dad nodded. "Now they've noticed." The silence swelled between them, thick as fog. Maximus looked at the bookshelves, the framed certificate from his dad's accounting exams, the family photo from a beach holiday 5 summers ago. His mum was laughing in it, wind in her hair. Maximus, 12 then, holding a spade like it was a sword, his dad's arm around both of them. "I didn't want you or your mother to worry," Paul said, softer now. "I thought I was buying time. I thought if I could just hold things steady long enough, we'd come out the other side." Maximus wanted to shout, to ask why his dad hadn't just told them, why he'd chosen secrecy over honesty. But he could see the answer already, written in the lines around his father's eyes. Pride, fear, the impossibility of letting them see him fail. He sat down in the chair opposite, slowly. "What happens now?" he asked. Paul shrugged, but it was a gesture of defeat. Internal investigation, a hearing, potential dismissal, possibly more. Maximus let the words sink in. Disciplinary, dismissal, more. "I didn't steal," Paul added, as if needing that distinction made. "Not in the way it sounds. But I broke protocol, misused funds, and that's enough." They sat like that for a while, the quiet filled only by the faint whir of the laptop fan and the ticking of the hallway clock. Maximus watched his father, really watched him. Not the man who picked him up from training, not the quiet figure at dinner, but this, a man unraveled, frayed, fragile in a way he'd never seen before. Something else tugged at him then, a half-thought, half-feeling. Something he couldn't place, a shadow just outside the frame. And somewhere deep down, Maximus began to wonder what else his father hadn't told him, what else might still be coming. That night, Maximus lay awake long after the house had sunk into silence. His room, usually a safe cocoon of discarded clothes and old football posters, felt suddenly too quiet, too airless. The questions wouldn't stop looping. What else hadn't his dad said? The light from his phone glowed faintly beside him. Midnight passed, then 1. He got up. He moved barefoot across the landing, the carpet soft and slightly worn under his soles. The study door was ajar again, as if deliberately left that way. The room beyond was dark, but he didn't switch the light on. Instead, he let the blue wash of the laptop screen guide him. He wasn't snooping, not in the way he told himself he hated. But there were things gnawing at him now, sharp-edged and half-formed. He needed answers, or at least, he needed to know how deep the cracks ran. The laptop had gone into sleep mode, but it wasn't locked. He hesitated. For a moment, he thought about turning around, about respecting a line that shouldn't be crossed. But then he thought of the disciplinary email, the lies by omission, the way his dad's eyes had looked earlier, hollow and distant, like they'd retreated from something he couldn't face. He clicked. The screen blinked to life. Documents, spreadsheets, nothing that made immediate sense. He opened a folder on the desktop marked Legal. Inside were scanned letters, case references, formal language that blurred into bureaucratic noise. Nothing jumped out. But then, something else caught his eye. A folder hidden inside the Drafts section of the email inbox. No label, just a string of random numbers. He clicked it open. Inside were 6 unsent messages, each addressed to the same name. Grace. Maximus's stomach turned over, just slightly. He opened the most recent one. It wasn't romantic, not exactly. There were no declarations, no confessions. But the tone hit different. It was intimate, emotional in a way Maximus had never heard from his father. You asked me what I'm most afraid of. It's this: that everything I've built will collapse, and no one will be standing beside me when it does. You once said I seemed calm under pressure. The truth is, I'm just good at pretending. With you, I don't feel like I'm failing. I don't feel judged. I can just breathe. You're the only person who understands that this isn't the life I want. I don't care about the image, the status. I just want peace and freedom. He opened another. Sometimes I wish I'd met you first. That's a terrible thing to think. But it slips in when the house is quiet and everyone else is asleep, and I'm lying awake wondering if this version of my life is the one I was meant for. I just feel like I'm living a lie, pretending to be someone I'm not, and it's slowly killing me. Maximus sat back. It wasn't an affair, not by definition, but it was something. Something real and raw, and somehow worse than any cheap secret. This was about connection. Longing. His dad had found someone who saw him, in a way his mom didn't anymore. Maybe never had. Maximus shut the laptop softly. His heart was pounding in his throat. He stood in the dark, surrounded by the faint hum of electronics and the distant tick of the hallway clock. A single question bloomed and refused to leave him. How long had his dad been this lonely? And a second followed, more bitter. Had he always been this good at hiding it? In the quiet, Maximus heard a soft creak, the familiar subtle shift of the floorboard on the stairs. He froze. But no one came in, probably just the house settling. Still, it was enough to jolt him back to himself. He returned the chair exactly as he'd found it, closed the laptop, left the room untouched. But something in him wasn't untouched. Back in bed, he stared at the ceiling, the shadows moving like water. The messages played over in his head. Not just what they said, but what they meant. His father, who barely raised his voice, had been screaming into the void through unsent emails. Maximus wasn't sure what unnerved him more, the secrets or the sadness beneath them. He thought about his mother, about the way her tone sharpened lately, the distance between their bedroom doors, the jewelry box tucked away now, unused. She'd become a version of herself Maximus didn't recognize, brittle, polished, performative. They were all pretending, he realized, pretending the walls weren't crumbling, pretending dinner was enough to glue the pieces together, pretending he couldn't feel it all slipping through. Maybe his dad had just stopped pretending first. In the next room, the radiator groaned faintly. Somewhere, a fox barked in the distance. The world turned as usual. But inside their household, Maximus knew everything was shifting. And the scariest part? This was only the beginning. The disciplinary was meant to be private, behind closed doors. internal proceedings, confidential outcomes. But rumors have their own kind of gravity. Once set in motion, they're impossible to contain. By Thursday, Maximus could feel it before he heard it. A shift in the way people looked at him, not with cruelty, not yet, but something worse. Pity. He walked into school, rucksack slung low, hood up despite the mild weather. He could tell. The way two Year 11s stopped mid-conversation as he passed. The way Mr. Saunders, the usually flinty PE teacher, gave him a rare, soft nod in the corridor, like someone offering condolences. The whispers reached his ears in fragments. His dad worked for some firm in the city. Heard it was money, like embezzlement or something. Thought they were loaded. Maximus kept walking. He sat at the back of English, earphones in but with no music playing. Just the sound of breath, chairs creaking, pencils scribbling, and the underlying throb of embarrassment pushing heat into his chest. Nobody said anything directly, but the space around him seemed wider now, like he took up more room than he used to, not in power, but in discomfort. At break, even Jake didn't ask. He just clapped Maximus on the shoulder, passed him a pack of crisps, and sat beside him, wordless. The gesture landed louder than anything else might have. But the real sting came later, on the pitch. Football was meant to be safe. A wall of motion and sweat, of shouts and shots and easy violence. But even there, it was different now. Every misplaced pass felt like it meant something. Every glance from a teammate seemed laced with unspoken questions. After a missed header, someone muttered, "Should have kept your head up, like your old man should have, yeah?" Maximus turned. It was Lewis, smirking, but already looking away, like it had been a joke not worth taking seriously. Coach whistled the drill dead before Maximus could say anything. Maybe he'd heard. Maybe not. By the end of training, Maximus's shirt clung to him like a second skin, his chest heaving, not just from effort, but from rage held too tightly. When he pulled his boots off, he did it with sharp movements, stuffing them into his bag like they'd betrayed him. At home, things had shifted again. There was no more pretending. The lights in the hallway had been dimmed to one bulb. The heating came on only after sunset. His mom had started cooking cheaper meals: pasta, jacket potatoes, rice. She never said it aloud, but the unspoken belt around their budget was tightening. That evening, Maximus sat on the stairs, still in his kit, the house dark around him. His mom came in from the study, arms folded across her chest like she was bracing against weather no one else could see. She didn't sugarcoat it. "We can't afford the school fees next term." Maximus looked up. She was tired, but not fragile. Her tone was too clean for that. Not angry, not panicked, just finished. "You may need to transfer," she said. "We're looking at a state 6th form nearby. It's a decent one." He nodded. That was it. No shouting, no begging to stay. He didn't ask how bad it was. He already knew, not in numbers, but in atmosphere. The household had begun to buckle. That hum of distant collapse, the one that had started as whispers behind doors and letters hidden under toasters, was now fully audible. They were falling, just quietly. After she left, he sat a while longer. He remembered a school project from Year 7, My Role Model, where he'd drawn his dad standing in front of the city skyline, holding a briefcase and smiling. He couldn't recall the caption he'd written underneath. Something like, "hard-working," or "successful." It felt ancient now. Naive. That image, his dad, suited, assured, reliable, was shattered. Not in some explosive cinematic crash, but in 1,000 tiny fissures. Hairline cracks you don't see until the surface gives way beneath your feet. He should have been angry. But what he felt was something else. Something emptier. A kind of mourning. Not for his dad, who was still here, still walking the halls, still drinking weak tea from the same chipped mug, but for the version of him Maximus had believed in. The one who always had the answers, who couldn't fall. He didn't fall, Maximus thought bitterly. He folded, quietly, like paper. Maximus stood eventually, climbed the stairs to his room, lay on his bed in his kit, socks still damp from grass. The ceiling didn't offer answers, but he stared at it anyway. Everything was changing now, and there was no going back. They didn't talk much after that. Not as a family, at least. Not in any way that felt like before. Conversations became sparse and clipped, leaving long stretches of silence to grow between them, like cracks widening unseen in a wall. Paul retreated into the sanctuary of the study, where the heavy oak door stood perpetually ajar, but rarely crossed. Inside, the glow of a desk lamp was a lone island in the darkened house. There, he buried himself in paperwork and phone calls, the clatter of the keyboard echoing late into the night. At the same time, Maximus's mother began working extra hours as a private tutor. Her voice, once sharp and commanding, softened into a measured patience she wore like armor. When she wasn't at the dining table with lesson plans spread out before her, she was upstairs in the guest room, the door firmly closed. The house had become a quiet theater of separate lives, each member performing their roles in isolation, sharing only the barest fragments of existence with one another. No dramatic shouting matches, no slamming doors, just a slow, steady unraveling, like a thread pulled at the hem of a coat until it could no longer hold together. One evening, the day folding into dusk, Maximus found himself on the back step. The sky was a heavy canvas of darkening gray, clouds smearing the horizon in broad, indistinct strokes. He didn't know why he went out there. It felt like a place between worlds, neither fully inside nor outside the house. To his surprise, his father was already there, leaning against the weathered wooden railing. The city's faint hum stretched beyond the garden fence. But here, in this small, neglected patch of earth, there was quiet. "I didn't mean for it to be like this," Paul said, voice low and unsteady, like a man trying to catch a thread of meaning in a windstorm. Maximus said nothing at first. The air hung between them, thick with things unspoken. He watched his father's face, the lines deeper than he'd ever noticed before, the weight of sleepless nights etched into the creases at his eyes and mouth. Finally, Maximus nodded. "I know." Paul shifted, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I did it for you. For this house. For your mom. I thought I was protecting you both. This is everything she wanted, and I thought my job was to provide it. I never thought about the toll it would take." Maximus swallowed the lump rising in his throat. He wanted to scream that it wasn't protection if it was all built on lies and secrets. But instead, his voice was quieter than he expected. "I didn't want a perfect house." Paul looked up, meeting his son's gaze. "Then what did you want?" Maximus's eyes drifted to the fading light, the bruised clouds gathering above. "I just wanted to believe in you." Silence, the kind that doesn't demand an answer, but demands to be felt. Paul's throat worked as he swallowed hard, the confession choking him before he finally whispered, "Then I'm sorry." The apology hung there, fragile and raw, imperfect, but real. It was not enough to fix what was broken. Not yet. But it was something. For a moment, the barrier between them softened. Maximus felt the tension in his chest ease, the tight knot loosening just enough to breathe. "I'm not sure how to fix this," Paul admitted, voice almost lost to the evening breeze. "Maybe it can't be fixed," Maximus said. "Maybe we just have to find a new way." His father looked out at the garden, The rough patch of grass strewn with fallen leaves, the old fence leaning unevenly, the empty flower pots gathering dust. That sounds hard, Maximus laughed quietly, a sound edged with both sorrow and relief. Life's hard. It's not the tidy story we wanted, but maybe it's real. Paul's gaze softened. Real. That's something, isn't it? Maximus nodded. Yeah, something real remains. They stood there for a while, not speaking, just two figures framed by the fading twilight. Inside the house, the ticking clock sounded louder now, measuring time in increments, both cruel and patient. Maximus knew the path ahead wouldn't be straightforward. The debts, the betrayals, the quiet distances, they weren't going away overnight. But on this step, in the gathering dark, there was a fragile truce. Not between perfect people, but between a father and son who, despite everything, were still there. Still trying. Still breathing. And sometimes, that was enough.